Okay, so have you ever just looked at the news, looked back at history, and got that crazy, undeniable feeling of déjà vu? Like global events are just stuck on repeat? Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the deep end of that exact feeling to figure out whether history is just a random series of chaotic events or if there's actually a deeper rhythm at play here.
So here's the big question. Does history repeat because we just keep forgetting our past mistakes? Or is it because heaven remembers our unfinished business? This is the core mystery we're looking at today. We're going to synthesize two totally different frameworks from our source text that attempt to answer this exact question. All right, first up, the purely sociological angle, the fourth turning. You're probably familiar with this generational cycle developed by historians Neil Howe and William Strauss. It basically tracks history through shifting social moods. We go from order to rebellion to fragmentation and boom, crisis. The idea here is that generations essentially hand down their unresolved, unhandled baggage until the pressure cooker literally explodes, society resets, and the whole ride starts over. Now, flip the coin to the theological side, dispensational time identity. As taught by religious leaders Myung Moon, this principle looks at the providential return of similar people, events, and historical periods. But why do they return? To restore failed responsibilities. From this perspective, when human beings mess up, heaven doesn't just throw in the towel. Instead, history loops back around to give us another shot to actually get it right. Honestly, both of these are just incredibly fascinating lenses to view human history through.
Let's look at the anatomy of a cycle, comparing sociology versus divine providence.
It is super interesting to look at these two distinct worldviews side by side. You've got cycles of memory, the secular idea that societies rise through shared hardship and then inevitably fall apart once they get too comfortable, and then cycles of providence, the spiritual concept that history just keeps repeating until an unfinished mission is finally fulfilled. Let's dig into that human side of the equation first. Take a look at what the great early sociologist Ibn Khaldun noticed. He said, societies rise through shared hardship, then weaken through comfort. Human beings build strength, then forget the discipline that created it. I mean, it's a purely human dynamic, right? It's kind of like ditching your New Year's resolutions by February. Societies get comfortable, social cohesion completely unravels, and that cycle of decay just triggers all over again.
But then if we pivot to the theological counterpart, look at this really profound thought attributed to Moses in the text. The mission returns because freedom is not complete until the heart, the law, and the community are restored. In dispensational time identity, we're not just talking about forgetting good habits. We're talking about deep, unhealed inner wounds. Like, if a group of people escape bondage physically, but they still carry that bondage in their minds, the conditions of history are going to keep looping until true inner freedom is actually achieved.
Which leads us to wonder, when these cycles finally hit that boiling point, what exactly are we experiencing? Is a historical crisis a punishment? Is it just a harsh correction of bad human habits? Or is it another chance? I want you to just pause for a second and really reconsider the true nature of the chaotic moments we are facing in modern history right now.
The brilliant historian Barbara Tuchman actually views these crises not as some kind of divine wrath, but as the brutal consequence of ignoring built-up social pressure. She points out, history is full of warnings ignored. What is not handled wisely returns later under worse conditions. Basically, when leaders lack the guts or imagination to make the hard choices, the bill always comes due. And guess who usually pays it? The next generation, under far worse circumstances.
Moving on to seasons of history and their parallel patterns. You really can't ignore the striking similarities between these two models. On the sociology side, you have the four turnings: high, awakening, unraveling, and crisis. And matching that almost perfectly, the providential stages of time identity: symbolic, image, and substantial. A society goes through these recurring emotional seasons, from total confidence down to fragmentation and straight into crisis, in the exact same way that divine restoration advances through necessary, structured stages over time.
To kind of bridge this gap between our messy human emotions and that divine consistency, our source brings in St. Augustine. He noted, pride, sin, longing, repentance, and grace recur because the human heart remains unstable. It's such a beautifully balanced view, don't you think? The cycle spins because our human hearts are all over the place. But the fact that we continually get the chance to return and try again, well, that points to a divine consistency, a sort of immense patience woven right into the fabric of time itself.
Next up, the expanding global stage and why the stakes just keep getting higher.
If you've been feeling that modern anxiety, the sense that our world is just incredibly fragile right now, well, both of these theories explain exactly why. The progression goes like this: the family to the nation to the world. If responsibility fails at a small, intimate scale and we just leave it unresolved, it doesn't just magically vanish. The wound actually travels. Generationally, private failures become these massive public patterns. And theologically, Providence has to restore that lost foundation by raising the mission to a completely new level. It expands outward to the nation and eventually to the entire globe.
Martin Luther King Jr. had a really profound observation that perfectly captures this expanding stage. He said, "We are tied together in a single garment of destiny. A crisis anywhere now touches people everywhere. Moral law and responsibility literally have to scale up to match our globalized reality. You just can't solve an injustice locally anymore and expect the whole world to heal. An untreated local wound is absolutely going to become a global crisis." Look at the secular global crisis, our interconnected web of debt, technology, war, and climate, next to the theological world mission, which is the goal of restoring the family of God beyond all borders. Both secular sociologists and theologians absolutely agree on one massive point here. The tests humanity faces today have completely outgrown our old national containers. We are facing world-level tests that require world-level responses. No way around it.
Which brings us to our final section: reset versus restoration and the final choice.
Since a fourth turning inevitably ends an old order, the big question is, what comes next? We're really left looking at two very different outcomes: a reset versus a restoration. A reset just means ending one order to build new, maybe slightly more efficient institutions. But a restoration, that means healing the underlying wounds and fundamentally changing people's hearts. It is the core difference between merely surviving a crisis to build a safer system versus actually fixing the root cause of the cycle so it finally stops repeating.
Jane Jacobs, the legendary thinker on communities, argued that institutional resets are totally hollow if they miss the human element. She wrote, "A reset is not enough. A society can rebuild systems and still fail people. Renewal must reach homes, streets, neighborhoods." Honestly, she hits the nail on the head. If we don't actively rebuild human-scale trust and local life, some grand new global system isn't going to save us. And presenting the theological perspective on that exact same issue, the source quotes Jesus with this incredibly deep thought: if people only seek safety, they may rebuild the same fear in a stronger form. If they seek love, the new world can begin differently. True restoration requires a fundamental change of heart, not just better safety protocols or a shiny new government structure, a safety net built entirely on fear that just resets the timer for the next historical crisis. So, pulling all of this together, what exactly do we need to build now? Synthesizing the takeaways from all our expert witnesses, there's actually a pretty clear path to navigate this global unraveling. We need trustworthy institutions that actually serve life. We need human-scale trust and vibrant local communities. We need families centered on true love. And crucially, we need generational responsibility, where elders offer real wisdom and the youth can rebuild without carrying forward that old fear. Ultimately, the whole duality of these two frameworks really boils down to this single, powerful thought. A turning can change systems. Restoration must change hearts. Generational turnings are gonna happen for sure. Systems will fall, systems will rise. But unless the human heart undergoes a true restoration, the cycle is just gonna carry our old hidden wounds right into the next age. Which leaves us with this final, lingering question. Will this generation fulfill what the last one could not? As we've seen, history hasn't been repeating by accident. The past doesn't just disappear, it waits. So I really challenge you to reflect on your own responsibility in this rhythm of history. Are we all just sitting around waiting for the system to reset, or are we actively participating in the restoration? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay focused, keep learning, and I will catch you in the next one.